Welcome again to Profiles on Nantucket Community Television, Channel 18. I'm Charlie Walters. Serene Meshel-Dillman is my guest today. The documentary filmmaker's most recent effort, The Fifth Dementia, had its East Coast premiere at the Dreamland Theater on Nantucket in the summer of 2019. It gets distributed nationally in the fall of 2019, and I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you.
You're a filmmaker, but you started as a dance student. You got a degree in political science, and somehow you ended up where you are now. Tell us how that happened.
Well, I grew up in New York City, and I danced at the School of American Ballet, which performed the Nutcracker every year, and under Balanchine with New York City Ballet. And there was a book done while I was a dancer there called A Very Young Dancer by Jill Kremens, who was Kurt Vonnegut's wife. And she did a series of books, A Very Young Dancer, A Very Young Gymnast, A Very Young Rider, A Very Young, get the idea. And A Very Young Dancer was about the girl that played Clara that year, which is the lead in the Nutcracker. I was in the background. And the girl's name was Stephanie, and she became very famous because she was on the cover of that book. And then probably about 8 or 9 years ago now, the New York Times did an article on Stephanie about where she was in life, and she had a very sad life after the book. I won't go into detail, but I guess if somebody's interested, they can look it up. But I just thought it was interesting that people still care about what happens behind the scenes in a ballet. And so I did a treatment for a reality TV show following a ballet company behind the scenes of the Nutcracker from auditions to final performance. And I sold that treatment to NBC and worked on finding a ballet company while they were working on selling it to a cable channel. They do that every year. I forgot what it's called, but it's in New York City. And they all go and they meet and they pitch their stories.
And how long ago was this now?
2012. Okay. And so the guy that was pitching for NBC came back and said, I did not sell it. So it wasn't going to happen. And so by that time, I had found a company that was interested in doing it. And I went back to them and I said, sorry, thank you very much, but we're not doing it. And they came back to me about a month later and just said, we really liked you. We really liked your idea. Would you just do it as a documentary yourself? So I said, okay.
Now, you had some experience on television prior to that, behind the camera.
I was a producer of television commercials. So I wasn't behind the camera. I was producing commercials.
Okay. And what happened to the political science?
Well, I took my LSATs. I applied to law school. I was all set to go. And then my father helped me find a summer job with Skadden Arps, which is a pretty big New York City law firm. And I met with a woman there. And at the time, probably 1985, women were working their, can I say asses?
You just did.
Okay. Were working their asses off, not getting paid
That's fine.
for what they deserved to be paid for. And so she kind of talked me out of law school, basically, because she was working 80-hour weeks and not making very much money. And I just said, I don't want to do this. So I didn't go to law school, and I ended up working as a production assistant with a company in New York, and that's how it started. I ended up working my way up from PA to coordinator to producer.
Now, when you were little, you weren't one of these children who had a movie camera at age 4 or anything like that, which is what is often the case. How do you account for sticking with television and production?
Well, I really enjoyed it, and I ended up working with a director named Bob Giraldi for about 15 years, who worked on both coasts, New York and LA. And he did really fun jobs. I worked with Paul Newman, a lot of sports people, on all the Miller campaigns. I worked on just a lot of, we did a lot of fun traveling, a lot of fun ideas, and he's one of the top in the business, so I got to see what a good director, how a good director worked. And I just loved the whole community. I liked the creative. I've always done stills. I took photography in college, and I always have had a camera in my hand. So I've always done stills. I had a book that I published, a still photography book, and it just sort of, when you have that sort of creative outlet, it lends itself to further creative outlets, and I felt like directing was one of those.
Well, it's always interesting to me when someone ends up in a career that he or she had not headed in the first place, and you're a good example of that. I mean, you didn't sit down and plot it out. It's just the way it worked out.
Right.
Getting to the Nutcracker came out in 2014 finally. Mm-hmm. 4 awards at 4 film festivals I have written down here, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell us more about that movie.
Well, I followed the Murat Tokayev Ballet Theater behind the scenes from auditions to final performance of their annual Nutcracker.
And how long a period of time is that?
That was about, I think it was probably about August to December, so about 6 months.
Oh.
Yeah, we had about 35 days of shooting, so hundreds of hours of film. And yeah, then it took over a year to edit it, and especially the music was hard to edit. The mix. And yeah, then we entered it in festivals and won a few. And then PBS airs it every year now nationally, the 1-hour version, which I cut for them. And yeah, that's...
How long was the original version?
It's 98 minutes. And it's been available on all the on-demand platforms since Gravitas Ventures bought it from me. And I think they have it on iTunes, Amazon, Hulu. There's probably like 10 different platforms. So
it's everywhere, really.
Yeah. It's worldwide now, yeah.
You mentioned recording the music. I want to hear more about that, because were you recording the music that the audience was hearing at the time of the production? Or were you re-recording?
Are we talking about Nutcracker or
Nutcracker?
Fifth Dimension? Nutcracker was all Tchaikovsky recordings, so everything was in the public domain. So in terms of rights, that was easy, which was the exact opposite of the film, The Fifth Dimension. Yeah, that was like the biggest job was the rights to all those songs.
I'm not surprised to hear that.
But because of that, I was able to cut together a lot of the music the way I don't know how to explain that really, but we had to cut the film. Obviously, the Nutcracker performance is like 3 hours long, and the film is an hour and a half, and it had 5-10 minutes of the performance. So we had to cram all the different video together and make the music flow. And I credit my editor, Brian George, with that, a lot of that, because he had a really good ear. He would always cut on a downbeat. He would always finish out a phrase of an 8 count, or he would get the same note or chord progression, or he would make it flow so that it worked.
It's sort of like 3-dimensional chess when you think about it, because it's not just the image; it's the music you're hearing too.
Right, and sometimes we put the wrong music with a video just to make it work, but nobody ever noticed.
But for the most part, was the music the audience heard? Was it that same recording that ended up in the film?
Sometimes,
or
not always. No.
Not always. Okay. Let's talk about The Fifth Dimension, your newest film, which Dreamland, as I said, showed twice in the summer of 2019. What does that title refer to?
Well, it's a play on the fifth dimension. It's the name of the band in Los Angeles. They named themselves that. So there's a sense of humor there, which I think hopefully comes through in the film as well, because it's such a hard subject that some levity has to seep through so you don't slit your wrists. And they have the Music Men's Mind is the parent organization to about 20 different bands around the U.S., the Fifth Dimension being one of them, and their flagship band. They were the first ones in Los Angeles.
And this is obviously a very different direction from the Nutcracker movie. How did that come to be?
Well, I was having my annual mammogram in Los Angeles with Dr. Ross Goldberg, and he had seen my Getting to the Nutcracker documentary. And he said, "What are you working on now?" And I said, I told him about the project that I had, which is now my next project. And he said, "Well, if you have a minute, I'd like you to come look at this band because I'm on the board, and it has to do with people that have neurodegenerative diseases of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and dementia." And I thought, oh, God, okay. And because that's so heavy. And I went to the rehearsal and I was sucked in right there because it's joyful and loving and fun and just uplifting, even though.
How many people did you speak with?
For the film?
For the film. Is patience the correct term in this context?
No.
What is the correct word?
People living with.
People living with, okay.
So the people living with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and dementia, and there's one with traumatic brain injury. So that's the proper way to say it. They were together for 4 years before I found them, and they had several concerts, and they had several small programs, television programs and radio shows done about them. I think the CNN did something about them. Carol, who founded Music Men's Minds, was up for the CNN Hero of the Year award. You know what that is?
Yeah, I do.
So I think she made it to the top 20, actually, and then didn't win, but it was a lot of publicity for them. And while we were filming, we were waiting to see if she was going to win.
And the filming took how long?
We probably filmed from May to December.
Talk about why music is so important to people, the people that are in your movie.
The music brings joy to every single one of them into their lives, and some of them have no joy at all. They lay in bed, they sit at home by themselves, they don't get up, they don't have anyone to live with them or be with them or care for them. And so they come twice a week to this community of people that they've come to know and love and sing the songs from their generation that they know and love. And the music cells in the brain are the last to die up until the day before maybe somebody would pass away. And so they can continue to play their music and get that bit of joy in their lives that they wouldn't normally have if they didn't go.
Having seen the movie, you have a person or people who, for example, might not remember meeting somebody last week, but they might very well remember the words to the song they sang 50 years ago, or they might remember how they learned how to play a particular instrument. They may not lose any of that capacity.
That's correct.
This is what you were talking about. The brain works in ways we don't fully understand.
Right.
And without that ability of the brain to work that way, this movie couldn't have happened.
What's your favorite song from your 20s?
Boy, that's such a long time ago. I don't know.
What's your favorite band?
Favorite band is the Beatles.
Okay, so what's your favorite Beatles song?
Strawberry Fields Forever,
I bet you know
probably.
every word to that song.
Well, maybe not, and I'll tell you why I say that, because I pay more attention to the music than the lyrics. I can probably tell you what instruments come in when and what those instruments are and how the song came to be what it is, which was actually two songs they made into one. So, yes, I remember a lot of it, but not necessarily the words.
Well, most people remember every word to every song that they love from their generation. And if they are musicians, which half of the people in the band are, the other half are singers, they remember all the music without sheet music. They can just play. It's crazy.
Now, does this extend to other things in the brain? Is it just music where they can?
I don't know. All I've witnessed is that this is a phenomena that, I just got a link this morning from a book that was written, which I can look in my phone and tell you what it is, about how music affects the brain in general, and how it's, you saw in, I'm sure, Alive Inside, they put the headphones on, and he starts singing and knows the words to the music that he knew the songs of. So I think it's a phenomena, and there's the way Dr. Bronstein in the film explains it is that there are circuits that are hardwired in your body, and they just don't get unwired as you lose brain cells or get older.
Now, I think you interviewed about a dozen people who appear in the movie.
I interviewed more than that. I interviewed probably 25 to 30 people.
But only about half of them.
We only included about 11 or 12 of them, I think.
Was that for length reasons?
Yeah.
In other words, most people don't want to sit through a 3-hour documentary,
Right.
but they will very happily sit through an hour and a half.
Right. And I had it, our first cut was probably 4 or 5 hours, and so I had to literally, felt like I was chopping my arms off, had to, just cut people whole out of the film.
Tell us about some of those people.
Well, Len, who is the conductor, who's actually in one of my posters, was 95 years old, Alzheimer's patient, lives at the Veterans Hospital. His wife is much younger, and she was the one that we've interviewed with him. And he does come every rehearsal, and he has his little conductor stick, and he conducts everything. And he cries every time there was a beautiful lyric. He listens to the words to the song. And every time there's I think, My Funny Valentine, he starts crying every time they finish My Funny Valentine. And there's just a connection with the music that he has that was just so sweet. But I guess his story wasn't as compelling.
One of the men you focus on is a man named Paul Fox, who actually was in the music business for decades and very, very successfully. Tell us about him.
Paul was a music producer that brought Bjork over from Iceland. He worked with the Sugar Cubes. He worked with Ziggy Marley. He worked with Natalie Merchant from 10,000 Maniacs. I think there's a Smashing Pumpkins, I think. There's a huge list. Huge list. You could look him up. It's just, and his wife Franny also was a songwriter, Franny Gold, and he got early onset Alzheimer's, so he was not able to work pretty quickly, and Franny had to switch careers to support them both, and so now she has a clothing company, which is doing really well, and Paul's and their son Sid is now kind of Paul's caregiver, takes him to and from all the rehearsals. But Paul can play. He plays in 2 of the bands under the Music Men's Minds umbrella. He plays in the Fifth Dementia, and then he plays in the Jazzanovas is the other band, and it's all jazz. There's no music lyrics put up on the board like it is at the Fifth Dementia. And he plays piano and drums and other percussion instruments, and he just plays. He doesn't follow music at all. He doesn't know how to read music.
Watching the interview with Paul, or the interviews with Paul, it was often hard to tell that he was having a problem.
Well, in the interview, he's the only one I interviewed without a spouse or caregiver. And I did that intentionally. Well, part of the reason was Franny was so busy that every time we tried to film her, it just didn't work out. But it ended up that I liked it that way because Paul, I felt in the interview, really gave away the results of his early Alzheimer's in what he said. He repeated himself over and over. He was stuttering a lot. He feels like he's volunteering rather than living with Alzheimer's. He feels like he's helping people by being there. And he is, for the most part, because he's the drum beat or the piano or the percussion that's sort of keeping the rhythm for the band. But he cannot have a conversation anymore, and he kind kind of repeats himself over and over, says a lot of the same things. But he's very loving and very sweet and does remember everybody. People, every time I came into the rehearsal, I got a big hug and kiss from him, and still do, even if it's been months. I go back occasionally and visit, and he always remembers me. But I can see the decline. It's pretty apparent in most of them.
Now, not all of your subjects would remember you from visit to visit, or would they?
For the most part, yes, I think so. Or they're just so friendly that I think they do. There's Leola, the older black woman with Alzheimer's, always had a huge smile. Oh, it's so nice to see you. Glad you're here. I don't know if she says that to everybody or if she meant it with me, but I feel like she did.
It's, of course, impossible to know what it's like to suffer from dementia unless, of course, one has it. As someone who doesn't have it, what did you learn from those people who do have it?
It's a really good question, and I would say that the one thing that I learned from this film is that I will have it, or my husband will have it, or you'll have it, or you'll have it. Out of 3 people in a room, one of us will have it. And one of us will be the caregiver, and then one of us will dodge a bullet. That's how, if you look at Maria Shriver's newsletter this week, that's the statistic. If you listen to Lisa Geneva's TED Talk, that's her statistic. It's with everybody living so long now, anyone, I think it's over the age of 85, will have Parkinson's, dementia, or Alzheimer's. And if the person that they're living with doesn't get it as well, they will be the caregiver. And a lot of the times, the caregivers are the first to go before the person with the neurodegenerative disease, because once you have the disease, all your stress goes away because you're not paying the bills and you're not working and you're not dealing with all the family mishigas, and you're just living your life in the moment, in the present, which is where those diseases bring you. So you don't have memories. You don't have long-term or short-term memories, really. So the stress is put onto the caregiver. And now that person is trying to feed, take care of, transport, medicine, doctors for that person, and they don't take care of themselves. So they get sick and they die first. So the main thing you have to do is, and I don't know how long-term health care insurance is anymore, because it used to be a thing, and now there's a cap on it, and it's too expensive, and these places where the people are living are $15,000 a month, and nobody can afford it, and Medicare, it's insane. So I guess the thing that I learned is that I'm going to have to save up enough money for my own health care if I get to that point, so that my kids aren't saddled with it, or my husband's not saddled with it. Or if he gets it, then we're going to have enough money so that I can get help so that I don't die first.
I would give an addition to that. What I learned watching it, one of the things I learned is that these are still people. You don't want to just, banish them to, Siberia or something.
Absolutely.
These are still human beings. They still have their own personalities, not the same way they used to be, but they still deserve respect and affection, and you can interact with them. It's a different kind of interaction. I don't know if you would agree with all that or not.
Well, you asked me that question, or somebody asked me that question during one of the screenings. How do you treat them? And it was a little confusing because you treat them just like you would anybody else.
Yeah.
You really do. There's no difference.
They're still people.
They're still people, and they're still very much their own personalities, too. Mm-hmm. I would add, as a follow-up, because people always say what's happening with some of the characters now, of the band members profiled in the film, since the film has been finished, Gary Lamel has passed away about 2 weeks ago. Larry Block has passed away. He was just he wasn't profiled, actually. He was one of the ones that we cut. Paul, the piano player, is now in a home. He's had several seizures and a massive stroke. Michael, the violinist, the German violinist, had a massive stroke. He's now in a home and cannot play violin anymore. Paul is playing the piano in his home. He regained the use of his hand. But Michael is almost catatonic now. The rest of them are just progressing in their diseases. I think Michael, the trumpet player, is progressing pretty quickly. Paul Fox is progressing pretty quickly. Diana and her girlfriend during the film, Deborah, have broken up. And the reason Diana wasn't going to come watch the film was because she didn't want to see Deborah on the screen. But her star turn won out. But a lot happens very quickly with these characters, unfortunately. Whereas with Getting to the Nutcracker, it's the beginning of their careers and their lives, and we're following them all over the world being successful, and this is one that's sort of the closeout of life. It's a whole different feeling of sadness that I have.
Talk about your personal reactions after spending time with people who suffer from dementia.
I don't think it was hard for me at all. I enjoyed getting to know everybody so much. I feel like I made friends. The film was mostly financed in part by Paul's wife, Marina, because she wanted the word to get out about Alzheimer's and Paul. That it's not something they wanted to hide behind. They want everyone to see and know about it, and how the music has brought Paul joy throughout his life, even though he's in a home now and he's still playing piano for all the people in the home. It's just one of those parts of life that is sad, but at the same time joyful because the music can help. So no, I felt sad when people died, obviously, but I feel like I've learned so much, and I've made some friends, and the people that I ended up putting in the film are just wonderful, really interesting people. And it's different from the other films that have been done about music with people like this, because it was all very individualized in a home before. This is as a group, as a community, and part of the joy that they get from playing the music is as a band, as a community. They love their routine, and it becomes a part of their routine. They'll get out of bed for it, whereas other things, they won't get out of bed to eat. They won't get out of bed, to see anybody or talk to anyone, but they'll get out of bed. Oh, rehearsal? Okay.
One of the things one comes away from after this movie is that you mentioned the three different conditions, and it's not one size fits all. Different afflictions are going to affect different people in different ways.
Absolutely.
It's not 100%. A cookie cutter sort of a thing at all.
Every case is different.
You and I did a Q&A after the showings of the movie on Nantucket, and I think you surprised the audience by bringing one of your subjects up on stage. Talk about that. That was a fascinating moment.
Diana Dabba Doe is a singer with the fifth dementia. Her daughter, Meredith, coincidentally lives across the street from me in Santa Monica. And I didn't realize that it was her mom till 2 months into shooting. But once we started, Meredith started coming by. She's a vocal coach in Los Angeles. And so she started coming by and helping them sing. And she still does that now. She comes to the rehearsals every week. And Diana loves that. And I think she loves the fact that there's some limelight on her. She was always a very outgoing, vivacious woman and has a lot of friends and travels a lot. And she's got more advanced Parkinson's now, maybe some slight dementia happening. And the more in the limelight she is on stage, the more she can pull it together. So when she came up last week after the Dreamland screening, she pulled it together like she hasn't in months.
Really? No, that's the only time I've met her, but I would never have guessed she was having a problem.
I know. Well, did you notice that I put my hand on her shoulder and took the mic because she started?
I did mention that, yeah. I mean, I did notice that, but when she first came up, she had great poise, and she sat down in the chair. And I looked at her and I said, well,
She's gorgeous.
How does
She's
it feel
beautiful.
to see yourself on film? And she immediately said, not bad. And then she went on talking from there. And it was like having a conversation with anybody else.
Yes. She's not the most advanced in her disease as a lot of the other ones. But lately, it's becoming a little more so with her. This trip was, I don't know if it's going to be one of her last, but certainly might be.
Is it physically and emotionally wearing? Is that what you're talking about?
She needs a lot of care. She came with 2 people.
There's one scene in the movie, and I'm not going to give it away by telling everybody out there what it is, but when I saw it, it was very moving to me as I was watching it unfold, and I thought it was the most moving part of the film.
Oh, I know which part you mean. Yeah.
And I asked you afterwards, as you were filming that, did you know what you had? And your answer was?
Absolutely, 100% yes.
And how did you, is it always the case if you're filming something, you know whether you've got something or you know you don't have it as you're doing it?
Yes.
Really?
I think so.
Really? Yeah. Would most filmmakers agree with you?
I don't know if most filmmakers have the same foresight. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it was obvious to me. I mean, the one thing as a documentary filmmaker that I have to try and do, which is hard for me, is to shut up. Just be quiet and let people talk. And I think with my first film, I overlapped a lot of conversation, and I learned from that not to do that again. So I really kept my mouth shut with this one. And sometimes it was uncomfortable, and sometimes other people felt like they had to fill in. But I kept my mouth shut, and that was one of the times, and I got what I was waiting for.
Before the film started to show, you said to me, there is a blooper reel following the credits. And my first thought was, what?
I know.
It surprised me. But then when I saw it, I thought, yes, it makes sense. Tell us what you did there.
Well, there was one scene which I didn't end up including in the bloopers. But when it happened, at the very beginning of filming, I thought, I have to do a blooper reel. So I kind of had it in my head to watch for it as we were filming. And the one that I didn't include that was in it, that made me think of the idea was when Irwin was in the recliner in his bedroom, and he was in front of a television, and he had the remote in his hand. And they were explaining, his wife Carol was explaining to me that this is where he would sit and watch TV, occasionally in his recliner with the remote watching TV. And I said, well, what do you like to watch? And he just got this smile on his face, and he just sat there and he went,
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
He loves Larry David. And so I just thought, oh my God, this is so perfect. Because it's so, he still gets it. He still has a sense of humor. He still understands comedy. And he can say, like, there was one time he was in all black. He came to rehearsal. And I said, Irwin, you look so handsome. And he said, black is slimming. So, and I thought, this is the only thing he said to me the whole day. And it's funny.
Well, maybe music and humor are connected in the brain.
I don't know, but it just, I thought, oh my God, these, they can have limited, intelligent conversation and get what's happening, be present. That's the thing about these 3 diseases is it brings everyone into the present, immediate present. There's no, and Marina says this in the film actually, there's no planning a month in advance, a week in advance, even a day in advance. You are in the present with these people every single time. So they're joyful because they're playing music. So everyone is in a good mood and happy. And, they may go home and just sort of wilt again and get back into bed and not talk. But for that hour and a half, twice a week, they're all in a great mood.
When did you realize you wanted to do a blooper reel at the end?
Oh, I knew when Irwin said curb, that was it. That was when he said curb, I thought, okay, this is it. I'm going to start keeping track. And I did cut out a lot because I had to be politically correct. So I cut out quite a bit that every time I would suggest a particular cut with my editor here, he'd look at me and go, "Come on, you can't do that." And I'd say, "We'll try it," and then we'd try it, and I'd, "Okay, you're right, I can't do it," because some of it was so just wrong, even though I thought it was funny. So.
Well, I'm glad you did it. I mean, it was one thing to hear about it, but it was something totally different for me anyway to see it, and I think it works.
Well, they all have a sense of humor still.
Yeah.
And they all were laughing. When I showed this to the cast and crew in L.A., when we finished it, I think it was in December of 2018, oh my God, they were just laughing so hard. And I thought, okay, it was worth it. I didn't want them to take it the wrong way, and they didn't, and there was laughter, and there was crying in the right parts, and so I felt like we picked the right ones.
I want to have you talk about some things about filmmaking in general. During your time as a filmmaker, there's a lot of equipment that is less expensive than it used to be. There are more platforms out there. There are more film festivals. How does that affect you as a filmmaker?
Well, what I learned from the first film, Getting to the Nutcracker, in terms of film festivals, was that they don't mean... Can I curse? Because I'm really
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think, I'm going to get for this, but I don't feel like film festivals do anything for a film, an independent film.
Why do you say that?
I did so many festivals with Getting to the Nutcracker, and I won. I got Best Documentary at like 3. I got Best Direction at 1. I got Outstanding whatever. I mean, I won. I applied for, we sent it into the Oscars, and we made the short list and all that, but it didn't do anything for the film. Nothing. The thing that did something for the film was me, because Gravitas Ventures was on a panel for one of the festivals. I can't remember. Oh, it was Dances with Films in Los Angeles. And I handed the woman, after I won, I won that one for Best Documentary, and I handed the woman from Gravitas my Blu-ray, and I said, "Here's a copy of the film. I'd like you guys to distribute the film for me." Never heard from them. And I thought, what does it take to get distribution here? We've spent 2 years of our lives working on this film, a lot of our own personal money, and a lot of people worked for free on it. I mean, it's a labor of love. And you win a festival, and then nothing happens. It does nothing for the film. So I had a friend, well, she wasn't a friend at the time, but became a friend, but she was a producer on a commercial that I worked on. And she saw that I had done this film. And she said, "Well, I did a documentary, and I got distribution with Gravitas, so you want me to put you in touch with the person that helped us from there?" And I said, "Sure." She put me in touch with this guy, who's no longer with the company, and he saw the film separate from the other, me handing them a Blu-ray at a festival that it was won. And he said, "Oh, I love this film. I would love to represent you." And I said, "Well, I gave it to someone from your company last year." And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I never saw it."
Are there too many film festivals, do you think?
I think there's too many. I think that festivals are done for making money and not for the filmmaker. I'm not talking about every festival. I mean, I had a really good time doing the circuit and meeting people, other filmmakers, and sort of traveling and getting. I wouldn't do it again, but one time it was fun. But I don't think it's worth doing and worth putting that money out as an independent filmmaker. For a film, again, because I have distribution already now. I don't need to do it, and it's not going to do anything for the film. So I get a little laurel on the front. Big deal.
I feel funny asking this.
I know.
Are there too many good movies out there?
No, I don't think so.
Are there a lot of good movies getting lost in the shuffle?
Yes, and also when I was applying to. Without a Box was the company I used to enter film festivals with my first film. I no longer use them. Now I use Film Freeway. And at the time when I was applying to film festivals, and I would get to know the people at the festivals, and I started seeing the same people. I saw the same guy in New York as the same guy in LA, same guy in Santa Barbara, same guy in Palm Springs. And I thought, what's going on here? And they're all working the circuit. They're all putting on basically the same festival in a different city. And it felt like here I am giving my money to all of these festivals, the application fees between $50 and $100 for each festival. Spend thousands of dollars trying to enter your film, and it's the same people deciding on the same films. I mean, I don't know that for a fact, but I just know that I ran into the same people a lot of the time. And so I don't mean to badmouth festivals. I think they're fine for a lot of films, and especially big ones that have cachet, like, Toronto or Sundance or Telluride or Cannes. Obviously, those are Oscar-contending festivals. And I did enter Fifth Dementia in 5 Oscar-contending festivals, just because if you win one of those, you can enter for Oscars. You can't do it without winning a festival that's an Oscar contender.
It used to be that you would see a movie on a big screen in a theater, and if you didn't catch it there, this is decades ago, if you didn't catch it there, you weren't going to catch it. Then television started to show movies, and then videotape came along and so on and so forth, and now we're at a point where people can watch a movie on their wristwatch. What do you make of all of that?
I'm just happy if somebody watches the film. Really, I mean, diehard film buffs say you can only watch it on the screen. And yeah, there are certain films that I would think would be much more gravity. I mean, I can't imagine watching that on a phone, but on a big screen, it was incredible. But people don't do that. I mean, my husband watches movies on his phone at night in bed,
On his phone?
On his phone.
Really?
That's how he falls asleep. So it just is the way it is now.
Well, when you're making a film, do you have in the back of my mind somebody's going to watch this on a phone?
No.
It doesn't affect how you're making the movie.
No, I would really like for people to see Getting to the Nutcracker on a big screen, because it's a beautiful film. It's beautifully shot. My cinematographer is this little Russian guy who did an amazing job. I don't think Fifth Dementia is a pretty film, so it doesn't need to be seen on a huge screen like that. It's more of a informational, I think, film. But certain films certainly are more appreciated on a big screen. It's just the way it is, It's where technology is, and it's good and bad. It's good because you can do a film for less than $1 million now, less than $500,000, but you don't, as a filmmaker, you know that the audience will not see it the way it's intended to be seen, but you just have to accept that. I mean, as a still photographer, I went from film to digital kicking and screaming. I still think film is better, but I can't afford to shoot on film anymore.
You told us where we can find Getting to the Nutcracker. Fifth Dementia premieres nationally in the fall, and at that point, how will one catch it? Just in theaters at first, but then what? It will be on
TVOD, which is television on demand, for Alzheimer's Awareness Month this November. And after that, either if it does well, then hopefully a Netflix or an Amazon or Hulu will buy it and keep it on their platform. Otherwise, it'll just continue to stay on demand.
TVOD will coincide with theater showings?
There will be no theater showings.
No theater showings. Now, how unusual is that these days?
I don't think it's unusual at all.
And it's obviously not a problem from your point of view.
No, because I did theatrical in New York and LA with Getting to the Nutcracker and did nothing.
Last question. What's your next project?
So when I was away 1 year, 2 years ago, actually, I got a call from my mother who said she had just been diagnosed with spindle cell sarcoma, which is 0.03% of lung cancers. It's a very rare lung cancer. And when it's stage 4, there's no going back, no matter what kind of treatment you get. And she had just spent 6 years with my sister-in-law who had colorectal cancer and passed away. And she did not want to face the same physical disabilities that my sister-in-law had for her treatment. So she opted for the California right to die law, which puts you in control of your own death, basically. You can do, as long as you have a doctor who agrees with you that you have a terminal illness within 6 months, and you can take the medicine on your own without it being given to you by a doctor, you are allowed to take your own life. And I think there's several other states, Oregon, I think there's more actually now. I don't remember which states they are, but she told us that's what she was going to do. And so we came back from our trip, or she said, when are you coming back? And I told her the date, and she said, I'm going to do it 2 days later. So we went up to where she was living, and we all had long talks with her, and then she did it, and I filmed it. And that's my next project.
I can't imagine how difficult that must have been.
Yeah.
How soon might that be done?
Well, I have another case of a friend of mine whose best friend died of ALS the same way, took her own life. And I would like 2 more cases happening now that I could film and follow. And so I guess when that comes up and I can film it, then that's when it'll get done.
Serene Meshel-Dillman, thank you for coming by. This has been a fascinating conversation.
Oh, good. Thank you for having
me.
me.
Get you on again. For Profiles on Nantucket Community Television Channel 18, I'm Charlie Walters. Thanks for tuning in. Join me again.